أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear viewers of the MKSI Leicester YouTube channel, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the fifth session, the series titled An Exposition of Ashura. Sheikh Anwar Jaffer, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you keeping?
Alhamdulillah. All is well, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, before we continue or resume our kind of session and start with the fifth topic for today, just for the benefit of the viewers, I'll quickly in a sentence or two try and summarize what we discussed in our previous session. So our previous session was titled The Effects and Consequences of the Day of Ashura, where we briefly discussed the level of guilt that was prevalent at the time, especially after the massacre of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and how it materialized into actions and was further fueled by the sermons and the discussions by Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. And we finally concluded with discussing some of the actions and the responses that the different people from the different cities, especially Kufa, Sham, Hijaz, took, which inevitably led to the downfall of the Umayyad dynasty. The topic of today's discussion, following in the series of An Exposition of Ashura, is titled Who Killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam? Now, Sheikh, I'm sure as well as you, the viewers, we've all come across YouTube clips, YouTube videos, and other allegations where we, the Shias, and the commemorators of the Azab of Imam Husayn alayhi salam have been labeled that, oh, these Shias are those that they killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam themselves, and now they're mourning after him. And so I'm sure the viewers can appreciate this topic is one that, of course, needs some analysis. So, Sheikh, before we even get to the kind of depths of the topic, what's the reason that the question, the answer to this question, who killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, is not as straightforward as we may think? Now, for example, there are many sources or that we may point towards that, of course, the main villains, as we may like to call it, of Karbala were Umar bin Sa'ad, Shimr bin Ziljawshan, Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, and of course, Yazid. But what's the reason that this is still not put at rest?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله. It's a very interesting question. If you remember our discussions a few weeks ago, we spoke about how there are certain scholars within the religion of Islam that have sentiments towards the Bani Umayyah. Right, and we spoke about how, for example, there are certain scholars in particular who saw and interpreted the entire movement of Imam Husayn alayhi salam to be an illegitimate movement, right? And interestingly enough, and obviously I'm referring to the Wahhabi, the Salafi movement, which is very, very much prevalent today as well, where they wholeheartedly believe that the movement of Imam Husayn was illegitimate, it was unauthentic, and it caused more problems within the Ummah than if we had, for example, just given bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. But when you refer to the books of history, it's specific to the, the scholars amongst the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you will find a list of scholars, from the Hanbali scholars to the Shafi'i scholars to the Hanafi scholars, in the hundreds, that believe that Imam Husayn alayhi salam was martyred. He was slaughtered in the state of oppression. But then you have the odd, singular, isolated scholars here and there. Specific reference to Ibn Taymiyyah, to Muhammad ibn Wahhab, who was heavily, heavily influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah, who believed that no, Imam Husayn alayhi salam, what he did was absolutely wrong. When you read their words in particular, they believe that, Yazid was obviously right to the seat of the caliphate. What Imam Husayn alayhi salam did was very stubborn. He acted in a very stubborn way. The fact that he rebelled proved him to be wrong. And in fact, there are certain scholars who are influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah who have openly written in their works saying that Husayn was not killed by the sword except by the sword of his own grandfather, right? Meaning that Yazid was the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you have scholars like these having these sentiments, this form of, I wouldn't say hatred, but this this love for the enemies of the Ahl al-Bayt, then naturally they came and they presented ideas saying that no, if you actually go back into the books of history, you realize that the Kufans themselves, who were known to be Shias, killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So when they turn their eyes towards the Shias, and what we do during the days of Muharram, we lament, we grieve, we, for example, recite poetry and eulogies, and we beat ourselves. They turn around and say, look, why do you do what you do, considering that you are the cause for the death of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? You are the cause for his slaughter. And as you rightfully said, many of them interpret our different ways of mourning and lamentation as a sense of guilt on our side, that we feel sorry for what we did. We betrayed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and this is how we try and seek forgiveness from God, right? So it's interesting how you have two camps, two very, very polar opposite camps, where one camp believes that it is the Shias that slaughtered Imam Husayn alayhi salam, whereas the other camp says that no, it was the Bani Umayyah, and how different in ideologies these two camps are.
So, following on the same point, I guess this leads to the question of what other opinions are there that are used to justify, more specifically, that it was purely the Shias that were responsible for the killing and the massacre that took place on the 10th of Muharram?
Right. It's a very good question, very, very interesting question. So when you go into the books of history, especially our history in particular, you'll find that there are hints, you'll find that there are certain evidences that are used against us to show that the Shias, that the Kufans were Shias in reality, right? And they betrayed Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So for example, when you just historically, when Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam moves his Khilafah towards Kufa, they fought alongside him. They fought alongside him against Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. They fought alongside him, for example, against the Khawarij, and so on and so forth. And they were known to be his supporters. Now, when you have a supporter of Ali alayhi salam, naturally that supporter is known and recognized as a Muslim, as a Shia. And 20 years later, 21 years later, all of a sudden, they're now fighting against Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So naturally, that identity that Kufa had, which was to be the supporter of Ali alayhi salam, labeled as Shia Muslims, were fighting against Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So this is the first evidence that is often presented. The second evidence, I'm sure you've read through the books of history, where when Imam Husayn alayhi salam stands against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he goes towards Kufa. Why does he go towards Kufa? Because he knows that the Kufans will give him the support that he needs to lead an uprising. Why is that? It's because, building on the first point, they had affinity towards Ali alayhi salam, right? They had this love for the Imam alayhi salam, which Imam Husayn alayhi salam was able to capitalize on. So he sends Muslim ibn Aqil, thousands upon thousands of letters are written to the Imam alayhi salam, inviting him towards the city of Kufa. 18,000 letters were written, according to some scholars. According to Khawarizmi, a very famous Sunni historian, he says 25,000 letters were written to the Imam alayhi salam. So as a result, the Imam sends Muslim ibn Aqil. When he sends Muslim ibn Aqil, as history speaks, he's betrayed, and Ibn Ziyad gets hold of him and obviously executes him. Now, the fact that they wrote thousands of letters to the Imam alayhi salam shows that their loyalty was with the Imam alayhi salam, meaning that they were the Shias of Imam Husayn just as they were the Shias of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Furthermore than that, they betrayed Muslim ibn Aqil. So again, this adds further evidence that they were Shias. They betrayed the family of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, right? They executed, or they aided in the execution of Muslim ibn Aqil. They did not show support to him. Even more than that, when Zainab salamullahi alayha, Bibi Zainab, when she comes back to Kufa after the whole incident of Karbala takes place, in her sermon against the people of Kufa, she is very, very explicit in her language. She turns to the people of Kufa and tells them that you will never be able to wash away your betrayal. You'll never be able to wash away your mistakes. You killed Ma'dan al-Rasala. You killed the family upon which revelation was or had descended upon. And she refers to them as, in very specific, direct words. Some have interpreted as that they were the followers of her father, that they were the Shias of her father. Now she is rebuking them for them betraying her father and her brother, right? So all of these evidences, when you pile them, when you gather them one by one, it shows that the Shias were responsible for the killing and the assassination of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. And usually it's the same evidences that are provided over and over again. Just recently I saw a clip on YouTube where a Sunni scholar was explaining, saying that, well, hold on a second, the Kufans, they were Shias, they weren't Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? The Kufans, they were the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and they were responsible for the killing of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. And then he obviously proceeds to give all of these different evidences, one after the other.
I guess the next natural question that I'd like to pose here is, of course, the Shias claim that they love Imam Husayn alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt, but people of other denominations also claim the same, that they love the family of the Prophet, and more so they love Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Are you able to perhaps give an example or a few examples that how people of the other sect may even say that actually you're the ones who killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, we on the other hand love the Imam more than you do?
So it's quite of a comical discussion. This one is, and the reason being is because obviously there's the Salafi, the Wahhabi movement has always shown loyalty. They've always shown love towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Okay, granted, they don't consider them as the leaders of the community, as rightful appointed leaders of the community, but nonetheless they have that sense of respect, and they even go as far as saying that we have more respect, we have more love compared to you, the Shias, right? It's a very, very comical discussion, and the reason is because if you just to compare our interactions to our imams and their interactions to these same personalities, it's so different. It's magnificently different. When you look at a Shia, for example, and his interactions with Imam Husayn alayhi salam, his relationship, we are willing to sacrifice our time, we're willing to sacrifice our wealth, we're willing to sacrifice spending time with our families to go towards the lands of Karbala, to go for the ziyarah of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. And this is a practice that has been going on for centuries, right? It's not something new. People used to travel for months upon months just to perform the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Many a times they were attacked, many of them were killed, many of them had their limbs severed from their bodies. Many of the oppressors tried to destroy the shrine of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and yet, despite the fact, the Muslims or the Shias have always maintained the practice of the ziyarah of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. When you compare that to many of, for example, the Salafiyya movement and their scholars, you look at Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, for example, he comes into power, and the first order of business is to destroy Jannatul Baqi. If power was given to these same individuals, there is no shadow of a doubt that they will walk into Karbala and destroy the shrine of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So how can you compare the two? You have on the one hand people who are willing to give their lives, literally, for the ziyarah of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, but then on the other hand, people see it's a necessity to destroy the shrine of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So these are very, very strong differences, right? Not only that, but scholars even go on to say, well, hold on a second. If you look at the Salaf, for example, the people who believe in the Wahhabi movement, they not only do they love the Ahlul Bayt, we don't deny that. They do have some love for the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam as scholars, as ethical scholars, as religious scholars, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they still have love for the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. Right? They still love Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, they still love Yazid ibn Muawiyah. How is it possible to love Imam Husayn alayhi salam and yet at the same time love Yazid ibn Muawiyah, who according to them was rightfully appointed, who according to them no one had the right to stand up against him? How is it possible for two hearts to love two personalities that were polar opposites of one another? Right? How can a heart, for example, love Ibrahim alayhi salam and at the same time love Nimrod? How can a heart love Musa alayhi salam and at the same time love, for example, Fir'aun or Qarun or Haman, for example? Right? The ayah of the Holy Quran is very clear. مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِنْ قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. And Allah has not made two hearts in the in the chest of the human being. A single heart cannot love two individuals who have different disciplines, who have different principles that they live by. Doesn't make sense. So when you put this together, you realize that no, the Ahlul Shia, we have the love for Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and our love can never be compromised. Our love will never be sacrificed for whatever the cause. And that's something that we really need to be mindful of, right? So this whole discussion about how they love Imam Husayn more than the Ahlul Shia themselves, then it's quite comical from that perspective. It's a no comparison at all.
On that note, on the day of Ashura, for instance, where the complete entire Shia population is in the state of mourning, and lamenting and commemorating what's happened to Imam Husayn alayhi salam.
Right.
Contrast to that, I believe, and from what we've seen and observed, this day is actually celebrated in other schools of thoughts, and so much so that it's also a day of fasting. Are you able to touch upon that aspect?
Yes, that's a beautiful example. That's a very good example because as you said, the day of Ashura is the behavior, the outlook on the day of Ashura is so different between the Ahlul Shia and the Ahlul Sunnah, or even the Ahlul Salaf. It's very, very different. We see it as a day of mourning. We see it as a day of lamentation, a day where a person should not even engage in business and transaction, right? Whereas the Ahlul Sunnah or even the Ahlul Salaf see it as a day of celebration, a day of jubilation, a day of joy. Yeah. And it's interesting because they say that the Prophet on this day, Bukhari mentions this, Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari in his Sahih, he mentions that the Prophet fasted on the day of Ashura. Why did he fast? Because it was the day when Nuh, who was Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was given relief from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet Ibrahim was given certain things from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was the day when the Bani Israel were freed from the punishments of Fir'aun and so on and so forth. Because it was a joyful day for them, it naturally became a day of joy for the Holy Prophet, and he began to fast on that day. Interestingly, the hadith say that the Jews used to fast on the 10th of Ashura, and the Prophet of Allah took this sunnah from the Jews and he established it within his Sharia. And that's very, very demeaning. That's very demeaning to see that our Sharia has been taken from the Jewish scriptures, from the Jewish religion, whereas Islam is seen to be a religion that supersedes all the previous religions, all the previous Sharia that came before it. Not only that, but if you actually go into the detailed discussions of the fasting of Ashura, you realize that this hadith that they bank heavily on is not that much of a authentic hadith to begin with. Its authenticity is very, very much questioned. Whereas if you compare the ahadith, again, which are mentioned within the sources of our brothers, where the Prophet used to weep and cry for Imam Husayn alayhi salam. The Prophet prophesied what would happen in Karbala, and he cried. And he told and he informed certain personalities within his family, amongst them his wives, amongst them Imam Ali alayhi salam, the Holy Lady Fatima al-Zahra. And all of these are very, very strong authentic narrations which are repeated throughout multiple different books, where the Prophet wept and the Prophet lamented over Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Now you compare, on the one hand, you have all of these different resources in our hadith where the Prophet lamented, and then you have an isolated hadith which says, oh, by the way, the Prophet fasted on the day of Ashura because it was a joyful day for him. You begin to realize the hard work that was put into to try and diminish the position of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. That even today, and it worked, my God, it worked. Even today you find, for example, people believe that Ashura is more of a joyful day than it is a day of lamentation, right? People are shocked when they realize what happened to Imam Husayn alayhi salam on the 10th of Ashura. So this is a very good example to see how you have two very different attitudes towards the 10th of Muharram. One sect, on the one hand, they mourn, they lament, and then the other sect, which are the majority, see it as a day of joy, a day of celebration.
Thank you for clarifying that, Sheikh. So, going to the topic of how who it was that killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and how the other sects push forward the notion that it was the people of Kufa who predominantly were the Shi'as. Now, what evidences or points are we able to offer from the other side, trying to prove the point that not the entire population of Kufa was Shia?
Yeah. So that's okay. So when you approach history from this perspective, you realize that this entire discussion, were the people of Kufa Shias, is that the whole premise behind this, or behind what the Ahl Sunnah believe in, or the Ahl Salaf believe in, is that the Kufa, or Kufa, the city of Kufa, were populated by Shias and Shias only. This is the underlining premise that's even there within our minds as well, right? That's not true. That's far from the truth, right? So now you need to realize what exactly was the city of Kufa. The city of Kufa was a garrison city. It was a city where, you had the military that had that often would rest. They would bank they would be stationed there for quite a while whenever they would go out for wars and stuff and battles and so on and so forth. So they would stay in the city of Kufa. The city of Kufa eventually became much more than just a garrison city. It became a place of trade, a place of investment. It became, and naturally, where there is trade, where there is investment, where there is buying and selling taking place, people naturally are attracted to that city and they move to that city. It became the financial capital of that of that particular time. And because it became a financial capital, people began to migrate there. There was heavy migration that took place, and it became a large and a very strong city. It became a metropolitan city, to be precise, right? Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when he becomes the caliph after the death of Uthman ibn Affan, what happens is that the Imam alayhi salam then moves his capital from Medina towards the city of Kufa. He transfers his government. Now, when he transfers his government, at this point in time, Kufa has become a metropolitan city, and it was populated by many different groups of people from different backgrounds. So in Kufa alone, you had people who supported the Banu Umayyah. In Kufa alone, you had the people who were considered to be the Khawarij, who had deep animosity against Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. In Kufa, you had the supporters of the Imam alayhi salam. In Kufa, you had, for example, the Jews of Medina. They migrated from Medina towards the city of Kufa. In Kufa, you had, for example, the Christians of Najran. So Kufa was literally seen as a multicultural city in itself. According to historians, they say that there were 25 tribes amongst the Arabs that had settled in Kufa, right? And now when the Imam alayhi salam moves to Kufa, because of this phrase, this phrase is so wrong in itself. People usually refer to Kufa as a Shia city, the Shias of Kufa. And naturally that has a very strong connotation that the entire city of Kufa were considered to be the Shias of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we'll come into the discussion in a few moments, how this was absolutely far from the truth. Now, when the Imam moves to the city of Kufa, there are certain things that he initiates, and there are certain things that he does. And by doing so, you realize that the people of Kufa weren't considered to be the followers of the Imam alayhi salam. So, historically, the Imam alayhi salam, after the Battle of Jamal, moves to Kufa. When he moves to Kufa, one of the first things he tries to change was Salat al-Tarawih, right? I'm sure you've heard of a very famous salah that others engage with in the month of Ramadan. And, you know, he sends Imam Hassan alayhi salam to go towards the mosque of Kufa, where people are engaging in Salat al-Tarawih, and he himself declares this. He says that I wanted to erase the sunnah which was established by Umar al-Khattab, because it wasn't a sunnah from the Holy Prophet, it was the sunnah of the second caliph, which is not part of the religion of Islam. So he sends Imam Hassan alayhi salam to go to the Masjid of Kufa and to tell the people that they shouldn't perform this bid'ah. And the reaction, the backlash was heavy from the people. You know, they would cry out saying, Wa Umara, this is the sunnah of Umar. Why would you want to stop the sunnah of Umar ibn Khattab? Now, hold on a second. The fact that there was a backlash shows that they weren't the followers of the Imam alayhi salam, right? Otherwise, they would have easily left the bid'ah and returned to the true sunnah of the Holy Prophet through Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? So this is the first piece of evidence that we show that, hold on a second, the people of Kufa weren't exactly the followers of the Imam alayhi salam. The support was there for the Imam alayhi salam, but not religious support. Second evidence, which is even as strong as the first evidence, is the death of the Imam alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam was struck on the 19th of Ramadan by the hands of Ibn Muljam. On the 21st of Ramadan, he was buried. He was buried in the darkness of the night. No one knew where exactly the Imam's grave was, except for Imam Hassan, Imam Husayn, and a very, very small handful of companions who were very close to the Imam alayhi salam. They knew where the location of the Imam's grave was. But the majority, in fact, the entire city of Kufa and the people of Kufa did not know where the grave of the Imam was. 6 generations later, 5 generations later, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was the one who disclosed, who was the one who pinpointed the grave of Imam Ali alayhi salam and said, this is the grave of my grandfather. For 5 entire generations, from the time of Imam Hassan until Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the grave of the Imam was kept a secret from the people. Why was it kept a secret? Hold on, if we're talking about the people of Kufa, if we're talking about them being the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, then how come they didn't know where he was buried? Why was that kept a secret from them? Right? So you realize that when you come across these evidences, you realize that no, the Kufans, they weren't considered to be the Shias of the Imam alayhi salam. Far from it. Right? That's not to say that there were no Shias there. No, it's true, the Shias were there. There were certain individuals who showed a lot of support to the Imam alayhi salam. There were people who were considered to be Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib, but they weren't the majority, they were the very few minorities. Right? And that's something also that we need to keep in mind.
So on the point where you have said that, yes, there were Shias, and of course you mentioned at the start that there were inevitably, at the end of the day, thousands of letters that were sent to Imam Husayn alayhi salam, who then sent his representative. Are you able to touch upon very briefly as to what happened when Imam Husayn alayhi salam did reach Karbala, and what's the reason that the majority of the Shias, if they found out that Imam Husayn alayhi salam is so close to them, why were they not there to help counter the army against him?
So that's a very good question, and what our scholars have done is they've actually broken down this discussion into multiple different smaller discussions, and they asked a very pertinent question, and the question was, what are you referring to when you use the word Shia? What is the meaning of Shia? Right? That's the fundamental question that needs to be raised, that needs to be examined. Now, Shia literally means to be a follower of someone, right? And because of our sect in specific, what's happened is that we've developed, or we've evolved this word in such a way that whenever you use the word Shia, you refer to an Ithna Ashari, the one who believes and follows the 12 Imams. That's the first thing that comes into someone's mind when they refer to the word Shia. But in those times, such a word was not something that had been established, right? In fact, there were three types of Shias that existed in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. The first type of Shia was the one who was considered to be a Shia by faith. So you had those who believed in the wilayah of the Imam alayhi salam, those who believed in his authority after the Prophet of Islam. That not only was he considered to be an Imam, but he was considered to be a Caliph. He was considered to be the administrator. He had the power of administration in the religious affairs, having divine authority over the people, just as how the Prophet had divine authority over the people than the people had over themselves. And all of this was ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? These were the people who followed what the Prophet had commanded them to do, which was to follow Ali ibn Abi Talib after his demise, after his shahada. Now, what's interesting is that these individuals, these Shias who believed in the wilayah of the Imam alayhi salam, believed that the Imam had authority from all dimensions. There's a very interesting hadith of Aban ibn Taghlab, where he quotes Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and Imam Baqir alayhi salam, one of the very famous companions of both of these Imams alayhim salam. He says that the Shias are those who, if they differed between themselves in a matter that had reached the Holy Prophet, they would refer to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and they would adopt his verdict and his opinions, right? But whenever there would be a disagreement that had come down from the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, then they would refer to the words of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And these are the Shias, right? So these are the people who believed wholeheartedly in the authority of the Imam alayhi salam and the Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam. That's the first definition of Shia, the one who is a Shia by creed, by belief. The second definition of Shiism is, or specifically refers to those who believed in the authority of the Ahl al-Bayt, but not as extreme as those who believed in the authority of the Ahl al-Bayt. They believe that the Ahl al-Bayt have authority in interpreting the Quran, for example, in performing the tafsir, because they were considered to be the most knowledgeable in their communities. They were considered to be individuals who are able to define the Sharia, the halal from the haram, and so on and so forth. And of course, they were seen as guidance and role models in akhlaqi aspects. But when it comes to politics, that's where they drew the red line, saying that no, in terms of politics, they had no authority whatsoever. In fact, the authority was given to the caliphs, right? The three caliphs that came before Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And of course, the Imam was a political leader, but then that was transferred to Muawiyah and so on and so forth. So they believed in the authority of the Ahl al-Bayt in providing information about Islam, but not in politics. Politics is where the red line was drawn. So this was the second type of Shias, where they separated literally politics from religion. The third type of Shias were those who simply believed in the political power of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam. They believe that the Ahl al-Bayt have political power, referencing to specifically Imam Ali alayhi salam. So they believe that politically Imam Ali alayhi salam was far much stronger than the previous caliphs that came before him. So when the Imam engages in the battle against the Khawarij, in Siffin, in Jamal, they believed wholeheartedly that the Imam's decision as a political leader was true, it was of justice, and given the choice, the fact that they had to choose a side, they constantly chose the side of the Imam alayhi salam. They accepted the leadership of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam, right? But they didn't believe that they were godly designated leaders in this world, that they were appointed by Allah, infallibles who would then explain the intricacies of the religion of Islam. What they believed was that the Ahl al-Bayt have political priority. So these were the three types of Shias that existed in that time. And you could see how different they were in their attitude towards the Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam. So when you look at the people of Kufa, the people of Kufa were of the third type, meaning that they didn't believe in the authority and the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. For him to be an infallible, designated by Allah, they saw him as a political leader. Whatever choices he made as a political leader, they saw that to be the truth and they followed him. But that's as far as they went. They didn't believe in his authority as an infallible, divinely appointed individual by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever you talk about the Shias of Kufa, this term, the Shias of Kufa, is a very specific term referring to those who believed in the political power of the Imam alayhi salam. And that was it, right? This is something that our scholars have constantly re-emphasized. When you look at the demographics of the people of Kufa in general, right, it's a very contemporary discussion which is very much applicable in our time as well. When you look at religion, religion is a manifestation of both belief and amal, right? What you believe has to be practically projected. It has to be integrated in your life until, or to the extent that it becomes second nature to you in terms of your words, in terms of your actions. Belief is not something that just resides in the heart. It has to be manifested practically. Regardless of what time you live in, this is fundamental. So when you refer to the people of Kufa, the people of Kufa, when you examine how they used to live and how they used to treat the Imam alayhi salam, the Imam used to complain about them. When you read, for example, the ahadith that he shares with Kumayl ibn Ziyad al-Nakhai, many at times he complains about the people of Kufa because the people of Kufa weren't able to understand his role as a leader, right? His role as an authority in religion. They saw him as a political leader and that's it. And he would complain many a times about this. So the people of Kufa, many a times, the majority of them, they had the belief to some degree, but these were just words. It didn't settle in their hearts to the extent that they, submitted wholeheartedly to the Imam alayhi salam. We spoke about this in the previous session as well, right? Where the people of Kufa, not just the people of Kufa, but in the Muslim empire, they used to, for example, sacrifice and compromise their beliefs many a times for, the world and the pleasures of the world. They used to aid, for example, the oppressors simply because it was something of benefit for them. And then when they saw the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Husayn giving his life, it was very new for them because it was an eye opener for them that it is possible to give your life, to sacrifice your life for something higher than just the materialistic goals of this life. And we spoke about that in detail in the previous session. So what's interesting is that, as a conclusion to this whole entire discussion, there's a scholar, phenomenal scholar, he's alive today, Sheikh Ali al-Muhsin. When he speaks about the whole concept of the Shias of Kufa, he asks a very simple question. He says, hold on a second. If you're saying that the Kufans were Shias and they actively killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, then they wouldn't be Shias in the first place. Because how can you be a Shia where you love the Imam, where you surrender to the Imam, where you humble yourself to the Imam, but then at the same time you go ahead and you kill him? That doesn't make sense. You either love him or you hate him enough to kill him, right? A Shia can't be two things demonstrating two very opposite actions. So he says that there is a contradiction in the words of those who accuse the Shias of killing Imam Husayn alayhi salam, because the very word Shia in itself is someone who follows and loves the Imam. But then when you have the same person who fights and he kills the Imam, then he's really not a Shia, is he? Right? So this entire accusation that the Shias were the killers or the killers were the Shias is, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't sit well with any academic, really, right?
Yeah, and the point that I raised in the last questions, that the whole population of Kufa wasn't filled with Shias, but there were nonetheless quite a few Shias. So what happened to those? What happened to the thousands of Shias that still resided in Kufa? Where were most of them when the events of Karbala did take place?
Right. So, interestingly, when Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan becomes the leader, right, when he takes hold of the Khilafat after Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, obviously this goes, he fights against Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Imam Hassan loses. He signs a peace treaty, and that peace treaty, which exposes Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, when the Khilafat comes into his hands, there are certain things that he does which effectively crumbles the Shias of Kufa. And I'm referring to those Shias who were considered to be loyal supporters who believed in the wilayah of the Imam alayhi salam. Muawiyah saw this as a threat, and he crippled these Shias in a very, very cunning way. So his first order of business was, he writes a letter to his governors, and he says that from this day onwards, anyone who praises or sings the praises of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, kill them. There is no immunity for them. There is no protection for them concerning their lives, concerning their properties, concerning any asset that they hold in their hands. Many of the Shias who were considered to be Shias and loyal followers of the Imam alayhi salam, their properties were seized. Economic sanctions were placed on them, right? They bought properties at a very high price. Muawiyah walks in, buys it off them at a very, very low price, and kicks them to the curb. And he did this to many. And we have recorded incidences where they would go running to the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Hassan, Imam Husayn alayhi salam, asking for help, financial help, because of the economic sanctions that were placed by Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. So the praises of Imam alayhi salam stop, the cursing of the Imam alayhi salam begins. Then you had the economic sanctions, as I just mentioned. The appointment of Abdullah ibn Ziyad, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, as the general of Kufa, as his rep in the city of Kufa and Basra. They say that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was a very vicious individual, very, very vicious character. And when he became the governor of Kufa, he kept surveillance of all the Shias and all of the tribes who were considered to be Shias. He had secret spies working in the streets of Kufa, exposing the real lovers of the Imam alayhi salam. He took them, he handpicked, obviously he found out who were the loyal supporters of the Imam, imprisoned many of them, killed many of them. Many of them had their, heads and hands and legs severed. That was one of the strategies employed by Ibn Ziyad. Then you had, for example, the assassination of very, very highly prolific, very prominent Shias. For example, Hujr ibn Uday or Amr ibn al-Hamaq al-Khuzai, right? Very famous narration of Hujr when he's captured by Muawiyah. And he's about to be slaughtered. And, he says that before you kill me, that I want you to kill my son. And they asked him why. He said, because I cannot live knowing that my son might leave the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen and have affinity towards Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, so kill him and then kill me, right? Amr ibn al-Hamaq al-Khuzai, they say his head was severed and he was paraded over multiple cities. And these were considered to be very loyal companions of the Prophet, not only the Prophet but Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam as well. After obviously Muslim ibn Aqil was slaughtered, again who was considered to be part of the Ahl al-Bayt, they say after Muslim ibn Aqil was slaughtered, was killed, 12,000 Shias were taken and they were captured and they were imprisoned. So after Muslim ibn Aqil is captured, until the time Karbala takes place, 12,000 Shias, the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the true believers of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam, were imprisoned. Personalities like Mukhtar al-Thaqafi and so on and so forth. Maytham al-Tammar, they say when he returned to Kufa, he was taken, he was seized, and he was executed. He was crucified on a palm tree, and he constantly began to sing the praises and the fadail of the Imam alayhi salam until Ibn Ziyad had enough and he literally just pulled out his tongue. He was left for 3 days crucified on a palm tree. These were the Shias, right? Many a times, and historical sources show us that tens upon thousands of families were exiled from the city of Kufa. And there was a major exodus that went towards, and what they did was they migrated towards the lands of Iran, to Khorasan. And that's how Shi'ism slowly began in the city of, or in the country of Iran, in those days, Khorasan. So you found that there was a major migration of tens and thousands of Shia families from the city of Kufa towards a different country altogether. And this obviously depleted the population of the true believers of the Imam alayhi salam. So when you look at it from this perspective, from a historical perspective, you realize that what happened in Karbala, the Kufans that were there fighting against Imam Husayn alayhi salam were no way considered to be the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. They weren't considered to be the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. They were considered to be the followers of either, the Banu Umayyah. They were under the fingertips of the Banu Umayyah, and they did what they had to do. They followed the orders of the Banu Umayyah. When the Holy Lady Zainab rebukes them, she rebukes them saying that this is now on you. This is obviously the decisions that you've made, and you will now have to face the consequences, whether it be in dunya, whether it be in akhirah.
Awesome. It appears that we are nearing the end of our time. So before we kind of continue to any concluding remarks, just as a way of summary for our dear viewers today, in the topic where we've discussed who killed Imam Husayn alayhi salam, we briefly touched upon arguments to show whether or not it was the people or the Shi'as of Kufa, and we've touched upon how Kufa, although had thousands and thousands of Shi'as, the majority of the population was still not what we may define as true Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt. Sheikh, before we end, are there any concluding remarks that you would like to leave us with? Especially on the point that when we refer to the Shi'as of Kufa, usually that term is often used as a negative connotation, as a derogatory connotation. It's used to an extent even as an abusive kind of curse.
Right.
And you may recall this being used multiple times. Would you be able to kind of conclude for us and then potentially touch upon this point?
Yeah, so it's a phrase that's often used, right? The people of Kufa, and it's a derogative term. It's built on a connotation that the people of Kufa had belief and chose to compromise those beliefs and betray the Imam. So whenever you see signs of betrayals, you automatically assume that to be the people of Kufa. Whereas the people of Kufa, in reality, they had no belief. They had no loyal support for the Imam of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, right? So this whole entire discussion is it's a very intricate discussion. And it's not something that can, you could just make a few statements and draw conclusions to it and unfortunately, you find that the scholars of the Salaf are very much guilty of this. They will approach history from a very shallow perspective and start making remarks, for example, statements, very shallow, very uneducated, very unacademic statements. But when you dig a bit deeper, you realize that no, it's far from the truth. You realize that no, the people of Kufa had no belief whatsoever. They weren't considered to be the supporters of the Imam alayhi salam. Those who were considered to be the supporters were obviously imprisoned, or they were executed, or they were forced out from their lands.
Ahsan. Thank you so much, Sheikh, for your time. And inshallah, we look forward to the 6th session next week, where we discuss and continue the series on the exposition of Ashura. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept whatever little that we had to offer. And finally, to hasten the reappearance of the 12th Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraja, and when he does come, so that we are also part of his ashab and ansar. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Inshallah, we'll see you soon. Iltamas ad-du'a.